Gamers who have dabbled beyond just Yu-Gi-Oh! Might recall the Duke from Resident Evil 8 and how he would tell the player, food is life. Chef Anthony Bourdain once said something similar: food is everything that we are. And taking things way back, we have the words of French musician, writer, and gastronome Jean Anthelme Brillat-Savarin, "Tell me what you eat and I will tell you who you are." Food is a cultural artifact that absorbs our thoughts and feelings and reflects the emotional and tangible conditions under which it is made. But if food is a repository for our hopes, it is also a sponge for our fears and misgivings. This is a video about food and fiends and Yu-Gi-Oh! There are a lot of food-based Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards out there. A bunch of the Naturios look like they taste great in a sweet salad, and we've got other food cards like potato and chips and ghost beef, and the entire sous chef line. So why fiends? Well, when one sits down for a meal, there are two parties, the eater and the eaten. There are no shortages of fiends that are themselves food, but we often also see fiends occupy the role of eater. In fact, of the 22 Yu-Gi-Oh! Monsters with eater and eating in their name, fiends occupy the largest slice of the pie, food pun intended, by a large margin. Representing the fiends are Air Eater, Aerial Eater, Eater of Millions, Trap Eater, Damage Eater, Edge Imp, Cotton Eater, and Man-Eating Treasure Chest. In fact, the fiend count is even greater than the sum of both plants at number 2, and any of the attributes caught in a three-way tie to come in third. We're not dealing with the biggest numbers here, but after 25 years of percolating, the data has at least had time to mature. And that's also taking Nefarious Archfiend Eater of Nefariousness at its beast typing and ignoring that it has Archfiend in its name. What we're seeing here lightly suggests a thematic association between fiends and the act of consumption that is comparatively stronger than with other typings. And to dissect that relationship, we're going to first look at two normal traps, starting with the Golden Apples. This trap released back in 2011's Storm of Ragnarok set, and can be activated when you take battle damage while you control no monsters. On resolution, you'll first gain life points equal to the amount of lost in the preceding battle, and then summon a Fiend-type Malice token with attack and defense equal to the amount of life gained. The OCG name for this card, Frigg's Apples, references the Norse pagan god Frigg, but the mechanics of its effect evoke the Greek myth of Atalanta and Hippopotamus. Atalanta was a princess and had a bunch of suitors, but she was also fast on her feet and challenged those crushing on her to a foot race, sure that she would crush them. Hippopotamus was like, yeah, sure, that sounds good, and then during the race tossed 3 golden apples on the ground. Distracted by the shining fruit, Atalanta stopped to collect them and lost the race. The effect of Yu-Gi-Oh's The Golden Apples is kind of like this. They waylay your opponent and distract them from winning, recovering your lost life points in the process and manifesting a fiend born from their short-sighted greed. Here we see a fiend emerging from emotional disruption born from hunger. In this case, not a literal hunger, but rather the sudden and distracting desire for something capricious and shiny. For an even more direct representation of the intersection of fiends and food, we go to 2002's starter deck Kaiba for the trap card Just Desserts. When activated, this card burns your opponent for 500 damage times the number of cards they control, and it's seen a decent amount of competitive experimentation over the years in Chainburn and Burn Stall decks. Although no fiend monsters are directly involved with this card, the creature depicted in the card art is decidedly fiend-like in appearance, and meant to invoke the impression of gluttony. One of the classical 7 deadly sins, gluttony is defined as a habitual greed and excess of what you need, and Just Desserts effects to burn your opponent on a sliding scale based on how many cards they control punishes them for getting too greedy and overcommitting their plays. And that's where some of the names come in. Putting cards on the field, like eating desserts, is something most Yu-Gi-Oh! Players / sweet enjoyers want to do, but those who get carried away with consuming put their life points at risk. In this way, the fiend can represent our fear that the pursuit of objects we desire, in this case delicious food or card advantage, might erode our very souls. Another interesting thing about this card is that Just Desserts is a play on the original idiom, which is Just Desserts spelled with one S. It's fun how both phrases communicate a roughly similar meaning while changing the definition of each word. Just Desserts is the iconic lack of things one needs that stems from the exclusive desire for the superfluous, while Just Desserts is the rightful and deserved lack of things one needs, meaning that it is justice that the subject finds himself stranded in a desert. But if fiends are so hungry, what do they eat? To answer that question, all aboard the tour bus from the underworld. The next stop on our devilish culinary trip is Dark World. This den of fiends has gotten a lot of love from the Yu-Gi-Oh! Franchise. They enjoy a robust lore that can be constructed from their card art and is also supplemented by a lot of screen time in the Yu-Gi-Oh! GX anime, when Jade and Yuki and the Duel Academy gang spend much of Season 3 dimension hopping. Looking at a sampling of Dark World cards, you could be forgiven for assuming it's an unfriendly town of evil fiends, but this isn't necessarily the case. Every place has problems, and Dark World has more than a few. But it's more than just a kingdom of lawful evil demons. There are commoners whose main goal is just to get by as they struggle under the boot of a devilish aristocracy. The main flavor text for the normal monster, Zur, Knight of the Dark World, reads, "The name of this illustrious knight is known by all residents of Dark World. He never oppresses the commoners." Not only do we have a Dark World celebrity who is famous for his good deeds, but we have confirmation of a wider Dark World population that values traditionally undemonic attributes like compassion and restraint. We even have the spell card Charge into a Dark World, which depicts Zur in the middle of a heroic leap with a startled Braun, Mad King of Dark World, who's frozen in place in a stance of what might be surprise. In the Yu-Gi-Oh! GX anime, Braun was an antagonist who sought to sacrifice the soul of Jaden's friends to create the super polymerization spell to destructively unite the dimensions. So it's safe to say that he's no Zur to the Dark World peasantry. But zooming out a little bit, our picture of the Dark World kingdoms bottoms with, of all things, a level 3 water aqua normal monster. Mad Lobster has 1700 attack and 1000 defense, and descriptive text that calls it a gourmet food renowned by the Dark World upper crust, and goes as far as confirming its sensational flavor. Not only is Mad Lobster a food, but a gourmet food, suggesting both a wide range of quality in Dark World cuisine, and also that markets exist under hierarchy of fanciness. Serving up even more fiendish seafood, we have Terror King Salmon, a level 5 water fish with 2400 attack and 1000 defense. This time, the descriptive text gives us a location, the Sea of Darkness. It also tells us that Terror King Salmon's roe is a delicacy in the world of darkness. It's worth noting here that when Terror King Salmon printed in 2003 set Invasion of Chaos, the introduction of the mainline Dark World archetype was still 2 years away, waiting for 2005's Elemental Energy set. But Terror King Salmon did release alongside the original line of chess Archfiends, including Terror King Archfiend, Infernal Queen Archfiend, and more. Beyond Salmon's text and the Sea and World of Darkness, Terror King Salmon shares the same title as Terror King Archfiend. 19 years later, this Archfiend connection would deepen with the introduction of Infernal Queen Salmon in 2002's Darkwing Blast set. She's a spin-off of Terror King Salmon and shares her title with Infernal Queen Archfiend instead. And then there's Grappler Angler, a level 1 water warrior with fiendish characteristics from the 2018 set Extreme Force. Its art shows it in the middle of catching a hooked Terror King Salmon, and Grappled Angler even has a thematic successor in the form of Double Hooking, a continuous trap from the 2023 set Cyberstorm Access. Although the Archfiends also predate the Dark World and call Pandemonium their home, they are connected to Dark World, where Snow, on Light of Dark World, becomes Wes, Lightsworn Archfiend, when they cross through the gates of the Dark World into the Realm of Light. But note how both Grappler Angler and the Red Cowboy Cavalier Demon in Double Hooking lack the grotesque and fanciful adornments worn by members of the Dark World upper crust and its military. Note also the Cowboy Demon's expression of exhilaration. Could this be a peek into the commoners of Dark World who have more in common with the people running about than the demons and devils of traditional legend? Often, the relationship between food and fiends is intended to reflect something malignant and hidden within us. But in the Dark World, we experience an interesting thematic inversion. Instead of food, an object of our mundane hunger, tying us to something internal, a disturbing something best addressed obliquely through metaphor, we instead have the opposite. The seemingly devilish denizens of Dark World are humanized by the mundanity of their hunger for basic sustenance. This is a fascinating suggestive territory. Perhaps we as humans are more demonic than we like to think, but maybe there's nothing supernatural about it. Our demons are ultimately just as human as we are. For our next fiend, we go to the Dark World's resident mad scientist, Kozaky. Like with the Archfiends, Kozaky printed before the actual Dark World cards. A level 1 Dark Fiend normal with 400 attack and 400 defense, its flavor text describes his drive for researching the languages of Dark World and the tragic collapse of his mind from working too hard. Although his English flavor text specifically says Dark World, the terminology used in its original Japanese, Makai, is different from the given for Dark World cards, which call their realm Onkokukai. But even though Kozaki's Dark World citizenship might be incidental, it was canonized during the events of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, where after Supreme King Jaden Yuki took over the Dark World, Kozaky becomes his head researcher in charge of monster card creation. Defeated by Jim Crocodile Cook, Kozaky used an OTK deck of motorcycle monsters, which isn't really relevant, but is pretty cool. Retroactively, his research into the languages of Dark World plays nicely with the fact that his OCG text and the other Dark World cards refer to their home by different names. But back to the food side of things. What's Kozaky doing here? Well, languages aren't the only thing Kozaky researches. Like his frenemy and academic rival Magical Scientist, he's in the business of making monsters. or at least turning monsters into giant robots. Charcoal Enpachi is a level 1 Fire Pyro Neuromonster with an impressive stat line of 100 attack and 2100 defense. Although not originally from Darkworld, Charcoal Enpachi would still find its way there, where it would become a test subject in Kozaky's laboratory. Here, Kozaky would retrofit the beleaguered tree spirit into a new and robotic form. But prior to these modifications, Charcoal Enpachi was actually quite famous. According to its flavor text, Charcoal Enpachi's charcoal was widely thought to be priceless. While Charcoal Enpachi is itself not a fiend, it would get co-opted by one, Kozaky, who presumably learned of the tragic tree creature from its reputation for making good barbecue. The processing of food from something artful and elemental into the mundane and unremarkable is a trend with Kozaky, who takes inspiration from the stereotypical workaholic who, in his fiendish dedication to task, is unable to care for himself to the point that he actually dies as a result. See cards Kozaky's self-destruct button and Overworked for reference. Actually, in the background of Overworked and Fruits of Kozaky studies, mugs of presumably coffee are present amidst his workspace detritus. And again, we have the transformation of sustenance from an artifact in its own right to just a stimulant to help Kozaky along the path to his own demise. Now let's take a look at the card Instant Fusion, a retrain of the card Ready Fusion. Both spells are depicted in the fashion of instant ramen packets. Similar to the way instant ramen cheats out a meal without thought of ingredients or preparation, Ready and Instant Fusion are able to cheat a fusion monster out of the extra deck while ignoring materials, and Ready Fusion even comes with Magical Scientist branding. While undoubtedly a reference to Magical Scientist's ability to cheat summon fusion monsters, we also know that Kozaky and Magical Scientists run in the same circles, and probably share the same workaholic sickness, as shown in the trap card Success Probability 0%. Ultimately, the foodstuffs related to Kozaky and Magical Scientists betray an underlying anxiety over the disconnect between us and what we consume under conditions of late capitalism. Gone are the artistry of Anthony Bourdain and the thrill of heroically double-hooking a Terror King and Infernal Queen Salmon. Let us return to the brilliant Savarin quote, "Tell me what you eat and I will tell you who you are." And let us look at the mad fiend Kozaky's food, shapeless powder of no origin. Hungry Hamburger is a level 6 Dark Ritual non-effect warrior monster that's not a fiend, but still deserves mention on this list. Despite the typey mismatch, its ritual spell Hamburger Recipe is suggestive. The original creator of the Hungry Hamburger is undeniably devilish in nature, and bears more than a passing resemblance to the Bistro Butcher, a level 4 Dark Fiend with 1800 attack and 1000 defense. But that's not all. More than 20 years after Hungry Hamburger debuted in the Spell Ruler set, it got a new spin-off archetype. The Nouvelles are a series of mostly ritual monsters that spawn from the gourmet dishes prepared by the staff of the Nouvelles restaurant. And although the Nouvelles ritual monsters, like Hungry Hamburger, are not actually fiends, they still come with many of the hallmark traditional fiends and devils. Just look at Foy Glace de Nouvelles and Pilates de Nouvelles. Here we have a clear deviation from the muddying approach to food that we saw with Kozaky. Again, we see food again as creation and as opulence, and a new approach to the demonic concept. Rather than the armored and menacing lords of Darkworld or the ghoulishness of Kozaky, the Nouvelle fiends, or rather fiend-like creatures, dress with fashion and exude an aura of haute and high society, which speaks to a different archetype of classical fiend. The sleek modern devil is often an animation of the perils of material temptation, that we often meet our own ruin in pursuit of wealth and worldly comforts that do not necessarily nourish the inner self. But this is not purely a warning. The truth is that the meals of the Nouvelles look delicious and I want to go to that restaurant. And you probably do too. This archetype is extravagant and silly, and it accents its demonic notes with a sense of fun. If reckless hedonism can be dangerous, so can unrelenting asceticism that deprives one of meaningful experiences like an elegantly prepared meal. But hey, you know what card pairs really well with the ritual monsters? Yep, Pre-Preparation of Rites and Ritual Raven. First printed back in 2007's Tactical Evolution set, Ritual Raven was designed to make the painful process of ritual summoning a little easier. A level 1 Dark Fiend, Ritual Raven makes up for its low level and abysmal stat line of just 300 attack and defense by having an effect that means you almost never have to summon it. Instead, when Ritual Raven is tributed as cost for the ritual summon of a dark monster, it can count as the full material cost no matter the level. This is neat, but wouldn't have much to do with the food until 9 years later in the Shining Victory set and the release of Pre-Preparation of Rites. Like Ritual Raven, Pre-Preparation is intended to alleviate the difficulty of ritual summoning. By activating this normal spell, you're able to search a ritual spell from your deck and also dig out a ritual monster that's named on it from your deck or the graveyard. This is a free +1 in card advantage that ritual monsters badly needed, because again, they are extremely inconvenient. Ritual Raven can actually be seen in the artwork of pre-preparation of rites. The little fiend bird is having a wonderful time eating noodles and salads and steaks and pastries. It's a fiend feast, but it's also a final meal. Behind the raven lurks a sinister crowd of black-robed cultists. They whisper nefarious secrets to each other while Ritual Raven consumes its snacks, blissfully ignorant of its swiftly approaching fate. Pacified with the yummy food and glittering lies it has been offered, Ritual Raven is helpless against the coming sacrifice, when everything given to it will be reclaimed by the dark beast to emerge. And moving on to more food-related fiends, we have the Malicevorous line, a series of level 2 dark fiends from the 2013 set Shadow Spectres. First, we have Malicevorous Fork, who has 400 attack and defense and is able to special summon itself from your hand by discarding another fiend monster. With 600 attack and 100 defense, we next have Malicevorous Knife, who can special summon a Malicevorous monster from grave on normal summon. Finally, Malicevorous Spoon has 100 attack and 500 defense, and is able to special summon a level 2 or lower fiend monster from grave with effects negated after another Malicevorous monster is summoned to your field. You'll need to field Spoon first to resolve this effect, but that means by normal summoning Spoon and discarding Knife to special summon out Malicevorous Fork, you can then bring Knife back from the grave with Spoon's effect. Similarly, if you first discard Spoon to summon Fork and then summon Malicevorous Knife, you can get your Spoon back. Either way, the 3 utensils in hand can combo into 3 utensils on the field, and can set you up for an expensive but strong monster like number 43 Manipulator of Souls, or like in episode 101 of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal anime, number 96 Dark Mist. Like Hungry Hamburger in the Nouvelles, this next card isn't a fiend, but is worth bringing up anyway. Mystic Tomato is a level 4 dark plant with 1400 attack and 1100 defense, and is the dark attribute battle searcher from the 2002 set Spell Ruler. When destroyed by battle, Mystic Tomato floats into a dark monster with 1500 or less attack from your deck. There are plenty of targets for Mystic Tomato, and not all of them are dark fiends. Heck, it's almost 2025 and we still have a ton of light fiends and dark everything else. But Mystic Tomato looks totally fiendish, and let's look at the breakdown of what it can summon. Notice the overrepresentation of fiends. Mystic Tomato is both definitely a food and a kind of honorary fiend. It can even bring out yugioh, or if you're feeling really spicy, you can go for its 1 sea serpent target, Danger Ogopogo. Alright, and that's it. Thanks for checking out these aimless Yu-Gi-Oh! Thoughts on fiends and food. Make sure to grab a Doom Donut on your way out, and if you have more thoughts on devilish Yu-Gi-Oh! Cuisine, or have ideas for more videos just like this, please let us know down in the comments below, and bon appetit.